Welcome to the June 24th Jalen Zones production user call. We have Jan, Levi briefly, Anchenig, Dave, myself, Michael so far, and Jan, you've done some work on a super simple overlay network. Could you tell us what you're up to?
So when you have a bunch of VNet-enabled jails or Beehive guests on FreeBSD, sometimes you really don't want to directly connect them to your physical network, or your physical network doesn't span all the systems. So you need an overlay network of sorts. You can make this arbitrary complex, but I went the opposite direction. What's the simplest thing you can just cobble together from what's already in FreeBSD base? So I wrote up the simplest thing I could come up with, which is this thing, a controllerless Ethernet overlay. For my test environment, I used three FreeBSD systems, each with one bridge and a tunnel to all the others. So it's a full mesh topology. And this is just configure the underlying network interface so that the FreeBSD host is connected to the network, the physical network, that is. Then I create a bridge with a unique IP address for each bridge on each host. I create GIF tunnels, which, because I'm adding them in the next step to the bridge, change from IP in IP encapsulation to Ether IP encapsulation, which then means that I now have a perfect full mesh in my Ethernet overlay, which, of course, if I don't do anything to break the loops, will die immediately with the first broadcast packet. But by default, the FreeBSD bridge driver will use spanning tree, which would work more or less, but it would be very inefficient because it would disable all the direct connections to come up with some, as the name says, spanning tree connecting all your systems, but it would be very inefficient. If you already have a loop-free IP routed network as an underlay, there's no need to come up with another spanning tree among those nodes. Instead, I use, or you could argue abuse, a feature of the FreeBSD bridge driver, which is the private flag. The rule for member interfaces on a bridge is if they're marked private, a frame received on a private interface is never forwarded to another private member interface. So as long as all the private tunnels are, sorry, as long as all the tunnels are private, it immediately breaks the loop because it can never close the loop over a tunnel. That means I can also disable the spanning tree protocol. So now I get to use the full underlay network bandwidth without any hops on the overlay. Here's the example commands you can use to set this up. Copy and paste ready for the copy pasta lovers out there. And yeah, so what now happens is anytime there's an unknown destination frame or a broadcast/multicast destination frame on the bridge, it gets flooded to all the discovery interfaces, which are all of them. It doesn't loop because to close the loop, it would have to go back over a private tunnel. And spanning tree is still active on the other member interfaces, which also prevents the loop. Now, one of the systems will hopefully respond and answer back with the reply. So they can ping each other over the overlay. It's a very simple system, all the components you need to use it are already in the FreeBSD base system. You don't have to install something, you just have to configure what's already there. There's nothing third party to maintain, and there's no centralized control plane to fail. Those are the pros in my work for it, but there are downsides. It doesn't scale. So if you have a lot of hosts, every time there is a non-unicast packet or a unicast packet with an unknown destination address, it gets flooded to all the tunnels. Yeah, so that's 5 or 10. That doesn't really matter much because it should be something fairly infrequent. If you have defects in your underlying network, that's also a problem because there is no helper to route around damage in the underlying network. You have to fix your underlying network. A limitation which is caused by using the simplest layer 2 encapsulation available is that there is no support for having multiple tunnels between the same IP addresses. So you need a unique source and destination IP per bridge effectively, which with IPv6 isn't a real limitation. With IPv4, especially if you're going across the internet, it's definitely a problem. And a consequence of it being so simple is that there is no safety net. If you fat finger it, you can easily close the loop again if you mess up the configuration by, I don't know, mistyping, copy and pasting the wrong name when setting two interfaces to private. Let's say here, if instead I here each time didn't update this and this, I would have closed the loop. So if you do this by hand, it's easy to get wrong. If you have any automation to generate that configuration for you, it's fairly safe. Yeah.
Being a mesh, does it handle a node disappearing or rebooting elegantly, or does that take everything down?
It takes that node down until it comes back.
But the others are fine?
Yes.
Okay, good.
The others don't care about that.
Good.
We started the discussion a bit earlier than the recording, so there are already some comments in the minutes. Michael, I think you asked, can it be done over WireGuard? No,
Yeah,
it
you
can't.
said certain parts can be replaced, so just go maybe run through the list of possible replacements there.
VXLAN will work, but you need one VXLAN interface per other bridge. So just like with the tunnels, unless your underlay network is multicast capable, then you can use VXLAN as currently implemented on FreeBSD in multicast mode. WireGuard cannot work by design because WireGuard is not a layer 2 VPN. So it doesn't encapsulate Ethernet, it encapsulates IP, one layer up in the stack. If you want to tunnel Ethernet over WireGuard, you need another encapsulation to do that. Oh, painted.
Yeah, I'm trying to edit, and it gave me that.
Yeah, and zero tier is a smart managed bridge. So if you use that, you get the way with one zero tier interface on each FreeBSD system. For that to work, you have to go into the zero tier configuration for the network, which you're bridging in on each node and check the checkbox under allow Ethernet bridging. And then that single zero tier node per FreeBSD system, so host that is not attached to the bridge, needs just one zero tier process. And you can have multiple bridges. You just configure one zero tier network for each bridge, add the allowed to bridge zero tier interface as a member to the bridge, and it works. You kind of have to not assign an IP address to the tab interface in that case, because otherwise it would be misconfigured that you have an IP address configured on the tab interface, which is a member and not on the bridge. That's a bit annoying, but yeah, you can't use the zero-tier control plane to set the bridge IP address, which is either a bug or a feature depending on what you want. Head scale, I don't know how it's implemented. I can't tell you what it can do and
No
can't do.
worries.
That's what I have to report.
Dave, is this a baby step towards what you described a need for last week? I believe everyone's muted. No worries.
I
Anyway,
think
cool.
Dave is
Thank you for
unmuted.
Oh, I was trying to say yes. It was. The sun is streaming in, and I can't see the mute button here anymore. Is that working?
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah. So Jan and I had a call today, which sort of went on from this. So on my side,
Okay.
I did this is sort of the overlay network part. Well, I suppose this is still an underlay piece, isn't it? I did the underlay testing, and I tried zero tier, which I'm pretty familiar with and already have set up. I tried Nebula, which is in ports and new. I didn't try VXLAN because I'd already tried it, and it works. The really big difference between all of these things is, do you want speed above all else? Do you want any failover? And how much fancy stuff do you want to put into play here? The thing I need is that Podman, as far as we can tell, must have a bridge at the moment, at least on FreeBSD. It's got to have a bridge. I found a proposal to enable moving just any interface into the jail/container, and this is both on the Linux side and the FreeBSD side, but it's not done yet. And that's actually what I think the correct solution here is. And then you can do anything you like in the FreeBSD side. You can set up whatever container, whatever network architecture you want, and then you just pull an interface and drop it into your container. And it doesn't need to be a VNet necessarily in that case. So what I will probably try next what I will try next today is to move an existing interface into a Podman jail by the use of hooks. So Podman has the same type of hooks that jails have, because they are the same hooks. And hopefully I should be able to attach either storage or networking at that point where the jail's created. And that would be good enough.
So I spoke to Doug last Monday, and he said that now VNet is hard-coded.
Yeah.
You could change that, but yeah, it would take someone changing the Go code.
Well, that's okay. He just has to tell me where it is. I can probably find it.
Look for VNet as a string constant close to jail set, jail create.
Yeah, I've already done other changes in the Go code, and it's not too painful. There's a lot of it, so half the problem is knowing, is it in which part of the 5 or 6 bits of the Podman suite is it in, because they're not all. It's not one monolithic tool. Yeah.
But given that the jail set system call interface uses pairs of string and pointer to integer or string, in an IO vector, it should be fairly simple to find the keys, especially because I think Podman doesn't call it a VNet in a lot of places.
No,
so if you just look for the string constant VNet in the code, maybe whatever Go constant is then used to hold that, it should be fairly simple to find that place.
I found it.
Yeah, grab -R. Yeah.
So it looks like he's written in C. This is in C++, this piece.
Okay.
But it looks like we want that one and that one. So if we look at creating it, VNet. So it looks like this creation thing allows having a VNet or not. And if you don't use a VNet, you inherit. It's your standard alias jail stuff inherited from the parent.
Wait a second. Does it just say nothing then, or does it explicitly set IP4 and IP6 to inherit? Those are different things.
I know, it uses inherit.
Okay, so it's not an alias jail in that case.
I see what you mean. It is
Does
using
not bring the usual alias
it is
restrictions
not
like
setting
Laravel
up
sockets and
an
stuff.
alias jail. But anyway, it shouldn't be overly dramatic because that's where it creates a here. Jail, IPv6 inherit, IPv6 inherit. You would just need to add a new type in here and then duplicate this block with different settings. That doesn't look possible. And then the actual jail command that starts it up.
So it does not do the system calls itself, it runs the jail command to do it?
Well, you have this is delving deep into the sort of Podman stuff. Podman is a
And Dave,
framework.
you can share your screen if you like.
I don't know if it's going to help, but I can. Yeah.
All right. If you wish.
Please remember to use a font size which is reasonably readable in full HD video recordings.
Yeah, that sounds like a you problem, not my problem. I'll share my.
That sounds like an audience problem we are recording.
Yeah.
Choose your audience wisely.
Yeah. And it's screen one. Yeah. So overall, let's just put both of those for a second. And we want to go to Podman Suite user ports. Podman Suite. So the Podman Suite comprises these 4 bits, which in turn pull in from memory another 2 bits. So Podman is the tool you use to run things. Scopio is the tool used to copy OCI bundles from one system to another. So you can say, okay, well, this thing is in that registry over there on GitHub, but I really want a local copy, bring it over here. So it's kind of like the truck driver. Builder is part of Podman, which allows you to construct containers from layers. And that's actually pretty cool. Each step in your containerization process is actually a separate jail. So it makes a jail, runs a command, captures its state, remembers that, makes a new jail, runs the next command, captures its state. And if one of those previous steps is something big like install package base, all the things, then the next time you run that or another jail that has that same line, it doesn't actually do that. It says, oh, I did this before and I don't have to do it manually. I can just reuse the hash. That's pretty cool. And I don't know what Catatonic is. I think it's part of the init system. I'm not sure. And that finally pulls in a thing called eventually OCI jail. And OCI jail is the interface between the Podman world, give me JSON or give me death, and the FreeBSD world, C or C++, baby. That's how we roll. And so that's what Podman, so what OCI jail does. It is the thing that instantiates jails. It is the thing that gets a message from Podman that says, do the thing, you know how to do it on this platform. And the rest of Podman is relatively, very relatively unchanged. So when we look for VNet in here, we find just 2 files. One of them create and one of them jail. And they're actually pretty tractable here. So we'll look at create first. So let's go find VNet. And do we want to go all the way to the top? No, we don't want to go up to the top here. But you can see here is the hooks that we have available. Pre-start, create runtime, create container, start container, post-start, post-stop. Half of that is directly equivalent to what we have on FreeBSD for our jail stuff. And then down here's where we decide what flavor of jail we're creating. The inherit one, which is, as Jan said, is not specifying the IP address of the jail. It's not an alias jail. It's just using the same stuff from the host. And then down here, VNet one. So in theory, I could add another type in here, and then I would need to add another stanza down here where it actually creates the jail config. So this is the chunk of code that takes the blob from Podman that's JSON and hands it down and turns it into the stuff we're more familiar here with, like enforce status, allow raw sockets, blah, 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 blah. So there's probably only two places to change this, one in here and one in the jail invocation down here. It doesn't seem too bad. And here you can see we know and love this here, jail create, error calling jail set. This is familiar territory. Yeah, is there anything else we wanted to cover there? That's enough. How do I unshare?
You move your mouse around until you see the little top bar, and then you open that and click and share, or you close the window you're currently sharing.
I can't close the window because it's a whole desktop.
Yeah. I can just take the share back, I think.
Yeah, do that. Yeah, steal it from me. Bizarre. Anyway, so the plan for the day is to make a couple of Podman jails and attach the three that I've got here, the VXLAN, the Nebula one, and Zero Tier, and see if I can at least figure out a way to get that working. The end goal is to not have to renumber all of my jails and applications, as well as change from normal jails to Podman jails. I want to split these up into 2 bits. So that's kind of the plan. Yeah. Anyway, onwards, Jan. What's next?
I see two people just joined, Daniel and Adrian. Jan, maybe drop your link to the wiki page you just went through and drop that in the chat and they can take a peek. Yeah, exactly. It's on screen. It's a simple overlay network.
I can do that here. I've got it.
Cool.
Already done. Your
Great.
chat.
So yeah, read through that, Adrian and Daniel, and bring any questions or a bunch of questions and comments on the doc itself. So, okay, cool. Time for perhaps your discoveries, Antranig, on FreeBSD mirrors.
Yeah, sure. Could I share my screen?
Why not?
Okay, sounds good.
I'll go button for that.
Replace current share, desktop number, this.
Ta-da!
Went on with Zoom. I have no idea how this works. Okay. I assume you see a browser.
Favorite.
Okay, that's good enough. So long story short, these are the measurements that happened from Wednesday of last week until yesterday night. We have a lot in the US, some
Measurements of what?
Oh, well, maybe I should go from scratch. So the problem initially is that Armenia was defaulting to South Africa over GeoDNS when I was trying to connect to pkg.freebsd.org. And that was a problem. A couple of years ago, I told the cluster admin that, hey, I don't know if you know about this, but like South Africa is really far away from here, and you should be moving me to Frankfurt. And they did. And after that, the Frankfurt server died. But we have a new one, which is the one in Sweden. But somehow, instead of defaulting me to Sweden, I got defaulted back to South Africa. So that's problematic. As a hobby, I also fired up this cache server in Armenia. So it's under the hood, it's just literally connecting to SJB. This is, what it looks like. But then the question is still stuck with me. Do we have misconfigurations in the GeoDNS configuration? So last week, we started doing measurements. My blog might have proper documentation on this. So these are the measurements from last week. They are tagged as FreeBSD and GeoDNS in RIPES Atlas. For those who are not aware, RIPES Atlas is a very small tool where there are like thousands of small machines all around the world. You can use them to send ping and traceroute and DNS and HTTP all around the world. The point is for like network operators to see how the traffic is moving. Yes, people have thought about using this for DDoS, and yes, there are mitigations to make sure that it doesn't work as a botnet. So this is from last week. This is ping with a very large size for a very large amount of probes. This is 1,000 probes per measurement, going from all around the world to each single FreeBSD package mirror, and then to the GeoDNS mirror directly. One thing we noticed, for example, there is one in Mombasa, Kenya, which had the following scenario. When it was trying to connect directly to Jinx, that's the South African mirror, it had good RTT, like 47 milliseconds, and assumingly it should also be fast over HTTP. We can't do it over HTTP due to technical limitations, but at least a large size ping, it should be theoretically the same. But when it defaults to GeoDNS, it was connecting to this IP address, which turns out is Chicago. So it was connecting from Mombasa all the way to Chicago with the ping numbers of like 230 something. So yeah. So I thought, hey, you know what? Let me leave this measurement to act every 6 hours for 6 days, and then we come back and see what the results are. Here are the results. I swear to God, I have it somewhere. Measurements. It should be finished. Oh, it's not finished yet? Okay, sure. Maybe time zone issues. So this is the one that we have now, right? So like you can clearly see that some areas have a problem, and so we have to figure out what these issues are. Like here in Nairobi, you can see this one is like okay, but this one is like terrible. Could be a problem in the ISP side. One theory I have is when people buy and sell IP addresses, they might not change the region of what the IP address, because now you can like buy an IP from RIPE into AppNec, or like from Africa to RIPE, right? So it could be a problem with that as well. So we should really look into all of these misconfigurations. I need someone who knows data analysis to figure out what the problem is. And we also noticed that in per country, for example, if I'm not wrong, in Taiwan, see like this one is having very good time, but this one not so much. Again, maybe the ISP bought an IP address from the US, so now it's defaulting to the US. So we need some kind of match between what's the fastest, what's the default for each connection that we got. I also made sure that we use the same probes at least once. So it's not like you're going to see, okay, Antranik in Yerevan is having a good time, but why is Jack in another city in Armenia not, right? So like at least every single person made a connection to every single GeoDNS at least once, so we can have enough data to analyze all of that. So that's the idea. I also asked the RIPE because if I do a measurement over HTTP, they don't allow me for security reasons. I can only target RIPE's infrastructure, or rather the RIPE Atlas infrastructure. So the idea is that to ask ClusterAdam to deploy RIPE Atlas systems right next to the package mirrors, right? That way we can do proper measurements. Or maybe on the same one, but on a different port. Yeah, sure. Or on the same machine itself that's running the package mirror, just on a different port. So that could also be an option, right? So that's the idea of it, at least. How we're going. I don't know how good this will happen in the end, but Adrian, you're in the world down under, right? Or am I wrong?
No, I am in Oakland, California.
Okay,
I've been
not
here.
the
I've been
world
in the United
outside.
States for like 15 years now.
Okay.
So
Okay.
you are an Australian who's been hijacked. Because I was following your accent last week and go, he's so Australian, but he's been there a long time. Maybe we need
I
to
mean,
get
the joke is I moved like 15,000 kilometers to a place that has eucalyptus trees. So like yay, right?
no kangaroos here. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, we also learned last week that the fastest PKG package, which measures which package mirror is the fastest to you, was broken. We submitted a PR with the fix. Basically, they just needed to match the new package format. Otherwise, they were getting a 404 and they were measuring the 404.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, we did that. It got merged and it's already enforced, by the way, for the updated version. Yeah, so we also fixed that. So yeah, next week or this week on Wednesday, we'll continue working on this. Hopefully someone in the community will know enough, I guess, R or awk to help out with the data analysis. So we can have some, data or rather information, not data. So we can continue on, and then I'll send an email to Cluster Adam telling them, hey, these are the problems that we found. Please fix these cluster issues.
So basically for that, you need to munge the data and then map each. Well, no, that doesn't help at all. So someone could take a bunch of IP addresses and announce them from one ASN, and then over time those IP addresses move to another ASN, which might not be in the same region, or that organization subdivides theirs. And what we're chasing over time is mapping each set of IPs back to a physical region where they're closest to. Sounds like a really long-term hard job to keep up to date.
Yes, and I'm willing to take this on me. I mean, this should be happening periodically in two senses. One, when a major shift in BGP happens, luckily there's BGP Mon to know when major shift in BGP happens. And the second one is when we take down or bring up a new package mirror. It's like, hey, we deployed a new one in Mozambique. Okay, so based on the data, who should connect to Mozambique by default? Who would benefit from that? Like, it wouldn't make sense someone from Brazil to default to Mozambique, right? So I actually don't know where Mozambique is. That was terrible idea to use. So anyway, that's my point. Is like, oh, there we go, there it is. Okay, so yeah, again, Brazil wouldn't make much sense, but if someone is in Zimbabwe or Tanzania, that would make a lot of sense to default them to that. But definitely not Armenia. Like, we're much closer to Europe than we are to South Africa. Maybe if it was North Africa, like Egypt, it would have made sense. But so yeah, these are the data that I want to have finalized in order to make the default same. And Jan had an amazing idea, which is PKG has PKG plugins. We should integrate fastest PKG into PKG as a plugin, like the idea of it, not the code directly, obviously. And whenever you run PKG for the first time, it should be like, hey, do you want the default, or should I do a speed test first and then set the default in the config for you?
Yeah, that's
right.
Heck, you could even just override the name resolution for the default one in etc hosts.
That's also a good idea because the IPs don't change of these machines.
Or some other kind of workaround.
Yeah, but doing it on scale, the plugin
solution
makes
would
sense.
be to make it even more aggressive and just have it pick the 2 or 3 best and then raise them for the first megabyte. So whoever gives you the best throughput over the first megabyte or so is the one you use for the current package invocation.
Yeah, okay, I see.
And maybe you cache that result, and if it underperforms under the value you expect, you redo the discovery. Or if any request fails. What is a bit dangerous about this kind of aggressive happy eyeballs techniques is that it can long-term hide degradations. Because if you have
But
a really crappy mirror with some broken upstream network in between, or even a completely failed mirror, users just won't report anything if they don't see breakage.
that's what happened last week. Remember, the Taiwanese mirror was down.
Was it though, or was it a routing policy question?
No, it turns out it was down. Let's see if it's up. It should be TWN. Is it up now? Not up. I still can't connect to it. And wait, I see something happening in this, whatever this is. Or maybe it's just too slow for me. I don't know, but feels down. Yeah. Oh, well, actually, it was down because we did run a measurement and no one was able to connect to it. Not even in Taiwan. Taiwan was defaulting to the two mirrors in Japan. We have two mirrors in Japan, apparently. The BBT, which is in broadband tower, okay? And the other one, which I honestly do not remember which one. I think KWC. Yeah, KWC, which is in KDDI Web Communications. So they have two mirrors in Japan, and Taiwan was defaulting to that. Yeah. Anyway, good data. Still no idea what to do with it.
Yep. I mean, given that we are already using SRV records, you could
Yeah.
use SRV records to make the GeoDNS give you a curated list of recommendations to try.
Yeah,
And
that's a
then
good point.
the fetcher could just, you would sort them into priorities and then try them all in the same priority, basically.
Yeah, look at
That
this
would
one
be the
in
classic way to deal with SRV records. Just, yeah.
this one in Djibouti, for example, is having really hard time. And if I look at it, copy API URL, if I'm not wrong, in a proper browser, which is not this browser, frankly speaking, but you never know. Okay, fine. And if I look for that, where did you go? You were a very nice one. I swear to God. Yeah, there we go. This one, you know what would be even nicer? I do curl. And apologies for not using loop fetch. If I do curl that to JQ, to less, and we'll look for whatever this is, we will see, no, come on, yeah, this one. We will see that this probe is connecting to this IP. This IP is South Africa. So it is connecting. Okay, so this is probably bad connection. From here to South Africa seems to be a bad connection. Okay, not that case. But this one in Kenya was defaulting to Chicago, which was really weird. Yeah. So yeah, a lot of data to analyze and figure out what's happening. Uganda, maybe also a bad connection here. Kampala, that's a capital, right?
The primary takeaway for me is that unless you're in Central Europe or North America or maybe Japan, the CDN is not going to serve you well by default. And it would be really nice for the rest of the world if package became a lot smarter about
like this is
blindly trusting GeoDNS as its
the
solution for its only candidate.
Like this is my region. Look at this, like how terrible it is in here. And I think one of those is deployed by me at a customer site. Yeah, this one is deployed by me at the customer site. Terrible, terrible connection.
Well, terrible internationally, but what about locally? What if it's plenty fast on a local network? I remember Latvia being an island where international traffic was a nightmare, but local was great.
It's a latency to the mirror.
Yeah, but this is like to the mirror, right? So like if you are in Armenia and you do connection to the Armenian mirror, obviously it's fast. If I come to measurements,
so don't make it sound terrible if you do have a known limited bottleneck to the outside world. Well, if you get the content and you get it to the locals, you've succeeded.
The
Yeah, most
Armenian
people don't
cache,
have that problem.
the
Okay.
Armenian cache Antronic runs is not official and not in the GeoDNS, so you
Hmm.
have to manually put that in. And again, then there's no resilience because you specified a single host name without SRV resolution.
But could he
Mhm.
This
use
is, for
SRV
example, to
records
the
and
Armenian
an alternative?
cache.
Sorry?
So like this, huh?
No, he can't use alternate records with SRV because the host name will not match and it's fetching over TLS, isn't it?
Hmm.
Of
That
course
is
not.
true.
TLS, you could use just HTTP and then
Well,
the SRV IPs then to the other servers.
Yeah.
unless you change the semantics and add some kind of TXT record indirection or know how to deal with C names or whatever.
This
that would
one, for example,
also
was
downgrade the integrity provided by TLS transport encryption, because if you kind of let yourself get redirected to another host name to validate against via a CNAME or TXT record, you kind of effectively disable server certificate validation, because it's not hard to obtain an arbitrary valid TLS certificate. It's basically
but
free these days.
we always have we have a public key and all the package stuff is signed.
The repository is signed.
The repository is signed, so it's very much a theoretical risk rather than a practical one, I think.
Yeah, but for reasons, FreeBSD decided to change from HTTP to HTTPS as the default transport protocol for packages recently-ish.
Yeah.
Despite it all being signed data, which also means you can't just use a transparent HTTP cache for it.
Yeah.
This one also was very interesting. I was measuring this like a while back in April, and I noticed that everyone here was down, including the ones that I know. But I noticed that these ones were okay. It turns out one of these, I think this one was deployed by a friend of mine in a small data center, and he told me they just got new IP addresses. So apparently, they defaulted to Europe because they just bought new IP addresses from Europe. And apparently they got it from here, IPv4.global. I had no idea. This is very interesting to know. You can rent and buy IP addresses. This is not a sponsorship, just, word of mouth. Anyway, that's what I've been doing, and I hope it works out good information for the cluster atom to improve our GeoDNS. Or, like, if people don't know, there's what we call the package mirror tiny mini. I don't remember what the string is. There we go, tiny mirror. And for a tiny mirror, it's not tiny at all. I mean, we're talking, where is it? 16 terabytes plus room to grow.
96 gigs of RAM. Yeah, hello.
Yeah, where was the RAM?
At the third line at the top.
Yeah, there we go. 96 gigs of RAM. More would be better. Yeah, no shit, bro.
Tiny. Very tiny.
Like this is not a tiny mirror at all. Like the actual solution is what Large Linux does, which is instead of having small number of large nodes, you should have a large number of small nodes all around the globe and allow people to mirror easily and allow the submission of the mirrors easily. They even have limitations of like, you must have IPv6. I'm like, well, most of the world, they're not very good with IPv6, unfortunately. I understand the value, but like if you are in somewhere in Africa or the Middle East, people still don't use IPv6. So not having IPv6 is not a problem.
But in some regions of the world, for example, India, it's quite common to have only IPv6.
Only IPv6,
with NAT64, DNS64 as a fallback.
That is true. Yeah, like some parts of Netherlands and Germany are, doing NAT46 at the ISP level. So
yeah, but in both countries, it's still pretty much the default to get full dual stack.
Yeah,
it's just some of the newer cheaper providers which
This one was also funny. They approximately need 14 IPv4 addresses, but 1/64 is enough, reasonable. I mean, IPv6 slows a lot. Why do they need that many IP
Well,
addresses?
is that the official mirroring documentation, or
Yeah.
you said
That's
it's
the
like,
official mirroring documentation.
oh,
Yeah, like they
goodness.
have,
So,
one for HTTP, one for GET, one for DNS stuff, I know, one for whatever it is. And it's a lot. And I used to run one of those in the country back when the requirements weren't this big. Like we had, I don't know, 12 terabytes of disk and uh, two, 8 IP4 addresses. We had no IPv6, and we used to run am.freebsd.org.
there you
Like that
go.
was
Well,
on mirror, but now it's huge.
while naughty, I wonder if they will ever find out if you only have an 8 terabyte SSD as cache and
Hmm.
throw the rest toward another mirror. But
Well,
Yeah.
please don't try that when you
Yeah.
apply for an official mirror.
I am happy with my cache, by the way, in the sense that what I do is I know what the users in the country need. They are mostly server people, so like I know what packages they need, and I basically warm them up every morning with a cron job. Like, hey, just do curl whatever that package is, and it will make sure that it's always up to date, right? So that's one nice thing to have for the package cache. So they are all apparently like 14 gigabytes is enough for most of the region here, and it's good enough that like, hey, if these 14 gigabytes are warm in the packages, we are happy. So no problems there. I also made a sister website which is download. Yeah, download.freebsd.am, which is I should change the title. I forgot. Which is again same thing, but this one is big now. This is 300 gigs. This is all the
okay.
download data for like ISOs and VM images. This is not cached. I should mention that this is actually available here. It's easy to rsync. So
So you may have just answered my question, but looking at
Mhm.
how Netflix has their appliances at data
Yes,
centers with like the top movies of the week, let's just say, and as we move to package base, we'll obviously have the most popular packages that happen to be package based plus some
yeah.
set of popular packages between caching and this ridiculous mirroring requirement. Can we have a balanced, pragmatic, share of like, well, the most popular stuff is easy to mirror locally or cache locally, and then yes, you may have to pull from a more distant mirror for certain things. I mean, is there some intelligence there?
Well, what we do have in package is support for raw transport protocol for package fetching via TCP. It's the same protocol used when running package fetch over SSH.
Uh-huh.
And this TCP protocol is fairly simple. It's basically line-based, give me this file, and then you get a size in the data.
Yeah.
And it would be pretty nice, in my opinion, to have a kind of ad hoc discovery mechanism where you would just via MDNS or whatever in your network announce, hey, I'm a potential cache. Ask me for my var cache DB content.
Mhm.
So that if someone on your network has it, you fetch it via whatever protocol, SSH, and then if it doesn't exist there, you fetch it from an official one and maybe inject it into your var cache, and now you're the on-site replica of that package.
Yeah. And this is good. Like look at the Arch Linux Neo Mirror thingy. It's like, hey, if you want to have a private mirror, here's what you need, basically. If you want to be
Nice.
a tier two, this is what you look like. And if you want to be tier one, like you have to prove your reliability, and then we will move that file, and now you people can use you as a tier one as well. And like the requirements are not as big as people would think it is. And I actually have a friend who runs a Arch Linux mirror in the country without any issues. So and like he proved his reliability. What was it, like 4 months without downtime and major issues, and then they moved him to the tier one, and then he became an official one. So basically. I like that. I actually like doing that. And they like, I mean, look at this. Look how many mirrors they have. Like
Yeah.
Greece, Hong Kong, guys, like it's very huge. And these are run by the community, not the project.
Well, going full circle to the overlay networking discussion, could we have a VM image that you splat down to a hopefully mirrored 1 terabyte SSD on a system, and it just calls home and starts testing speed and becoming a mirror if it meets certain criteria, and the user does
What
very
we are
little beyond just get
lacking
it
is
online?
the
I'm very
software
Hey,
happy
with
that
the
you asked
steering.
that.
yes, go ahead, Jan.
I'm
What did
very
you
happy
have?
that you.
For
Oh,
that,
Yeah,
we
go ahead.
would need both the kind of maybe a ready to run jail configuration or whatever, or
Yes,
a virtual appliance in Beehive or whatever.
Yeah.
yes.
And we would also need more logic than just resolve this as SRV record, because resolving the service record is not enough state. So you would have to have some kind of CDN logic within the client so that you
Mm-hmm.
So
can steer them to candidates.
I
Okay,
do have a
Anthony,
bunch
do
of
you have a thing?
scripts.
Go
I do
for
have a
it.
bunch of scripts, which is like the rsync for the downloads, the cron jobs for warming things up. I think it's in here. I
So
swear to God. So like I've made all of the tooling needed to do all of that, right? Like here's
here is
AKG
a
cache, here's warm up files, and people can use that as a cache, or they can just like download it for a very long time if they want to, right? So I mean, setting it up is not hard. It took me 2 days max to do all of this without documentation, because like we don't have any, hey, run your personal cache documentation kind of thing, other than like a single nginx config that was out there. But then you have the secondary steps, is like making things are warm, and the proper tuning, and finding out the closest, and blah blah blah. So I made all the tooling. Maybe I should document better and
That would be awesome.
release it on
Yeah.
the wiki. Yeah.
Not on the wiki. It should
just
go in the handbook.
Handbook. Okay.
Go in the
I'm
handbook.
not that good of a writer, but sure.
It doesn't have to be good. We continually make this mistake of going, it has to be perfect, and perfect is the enemy of good, and perfect is the enemy of done. And when you put stuff in the wiki, it goes there to die. No one on the internet, apart from a small hard group of FreeBSD people, ever looks at the wiki. It's dead. And the handbook, you can reasonably expect someone going, okay, this is here it is, this is good enough for me to use. And anything like this doesn't change particularly quickly. The two biggest changes in our package mirroring stuff has been when we started moving from when we started having package ng, however many years ago, that was now like 10 years ago, I guess, and now with package base. And that's all the documentation that would have been stable for a decade.
so package-based stuff doesn't really change much other than what we are using the package tools for.
Just a bunch more URLs, that's all, and different
Exactly.
stuff to see.
It's basically just one repository configuration.
Yeah.
The real painful slog was to actually write the tooling and the manual package configuration files for the base system, and to figure out how to safely enough do the merging and so on, that you don't break /etc every time you do a release upgrade and something like that. And the early prototypes in like FreeBSD 12, yes, there was package-based code in the repository, but every time you did a package upgrade, it would overwrite your pump configuration files and so on because they weren't properly tagged.
Yeah.
So suddenly you can no longer sign on to your account because you wanted to only use your hardware security dongle and not a password, but hardware security dongle, with a password to unlock, and your password hash is just star, and now you have to go to single user mode to recover your system. Not fun.
Hopefully those things have been beaten out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for the mirror things, I organized a connection for Fastly months ago, and I just need to keep bugging cluster admin to go, can you make this happen, please? And that would make a lot of this much simpler, because not only would many countries around the world suddenly have a dramatically better system, anyone who wants to do what Antranik has done here can pull from Fastly, and you're not hitting one of the main mirrors. That would be great.
What he did was intended to hit the official mirrors, as they currently are, because the goal was to figure out how much of a problem we have, not to, if you have a CDN, you can measure the performance of a CDN provided by some third party. Yeah, that was never his research question. Is Fastly better than FreeBSD's own CDN?
Well, demonstrably, if you've used Fastly for anything, not a little bit better, a lot better, all across the world.
It's a professional commercial CDN, and not it doesn't
one of them is a large
serve
business with many people working on it, and the other one is a core of dedicated people doing it in their spare time.
Joking aside, there's a technology which has already solved all of that kind of stuff for signed data, and that's BitTorrent.
Yeah, except we don't have
BitTorrent with web seeds.
Wait. We do have BitTorrent for the downloads and stuff, but is it even technically possible to use it for package?
Wasn't John marketing those or something?
With
BitTorrent
2, yes, it would be possible if you have some kind of fetch proxy to convert between the two.
And what about the poor people? And what about the poor people who are enslaved in Europe and they can't run BitTorrent, and then their ISP is going to call them being angry?
No, you can run BitTorrent in Europe.
Because every time my friends run BitTorrent in Europe, the ISP is like, "Why are you running BitTorrent? Are you downloading illegal stuff? This is a warning." Of course, they just keep doing the warning. They never
had some messages. What can happen is that you get some expensive paperwork. So the ISP, at least in most of Europe, can be compelled to rat you out. And then, you get an extortion letter. An official letter from a lawyer asking you to pay for your copyright violation.
Go ahead and share your screen, Jan, and let's note some action items here. It sounds like you've got some good points. And I believe Eva worked at Fastly and may have some insight, shall we say, outside of whatever NDA is.
Fastly offered us a great deal, which is free bandwidth if we get our shit together, basically, which is great. And we just got to get our shit together.
Yeah, what does that mean, get our shit together? As in, someone has to keep in contact with them, or do we have to change the repository format?
No,
so that cache validation friendly.
Because it's a reasonable amount of work. We need to set up a fastly.package.freebsd.org, so they want a specific DNS name, so you see it in the configs, and we need to have some sort of I can't remember the terminology off my head now, but a varnish mapping from the front ends to the back ends to say cache this, and if you don't have it, go here to get it. That's what we need. Like a lot of FreeBSD things, it is not necessarily complicated. It requires a certain amount of pre-existing knowledge about the infrastructure that we already have that makes it difficult.
So I've tinkered a bit with Varnish, especially for use as a caching layer for FreeBSD packages to undo the caching prevention measures the official CDN does, where this says no shared caching and a cache lifetime of 0 seconds in the Nginx configuration on the official CDN nodes. And it takes a bit of tinkering in Varnish to always validate the cache with an HTTP head request to get the E tag before I serve something out of my cache. But for bigger packages like Chromium or so on, I can still saturate the 10 gigabit link between my workstation and my desktop when the cache is warm. So it's worth it, and especially for package-based experiments, it doesn't burden the regional mirror with several package base fetches of 3 gigabytes per minute or something when I'm testing stuff.
Yeah, dozens per day. Could you share
Yeah.
the agenda doc, please, Jan?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. No. Oh my God, I can't type on this. No. So, oh my God. So action items, how do we have nice things? And does Fastly eliminate the need for all of this because it's magic and we rely on a third party or what?
Yeah, I think lessons learned from the past is you can't rely entirely on just having your own package mirrors. Sorry, you can't rely entirely on having a package mirror from a third party. You've got to have your own.
Amen.
Yep. And I'm just looking at the last week when Slack announced that the Kubernetes group and another cloud foundation were no longer going to get their super free deal anymore. And they should either pack up or go down to a much smaller system. That stuff happens all the time. We've seen it happen time and time again. But we should finish this. Yeah.
And I trust their lessons from Arch Linux. That seemed pretty accessible and reasonable on.
Yeah.
I know a lot of FreeBSD people who would rather run their own mirror.
The big takeaway from Arch and from, I can't remember the name of the Linux project, there's a guy who sends out like these little router boxes where you can just drop them in the data center, is that overall our setup is too complicated and mirroring all the data everywhere is no longer sustainable. The boxes are too big, and that means everybody, like all of Europe, is using one mirror in Sweden. And if you look at the geography of Europe, that's pretty silly.
Yeah.
The other question is, what are we talking about when it comes to cost? Renting a dedicated server of the recommended size in Europe is like $120, $150 a month.
Yes, but then you need to add like 200 terabytes of bandwidth a month.
Do
and
you?
That changes the equation.
Do you really need that much if you have multiple of them?
Well,
200 terabytes a month of packet fetches maybe for all of Europe, but if you get 20 or 30 terabytes per server and you have multiple of them,
so
each one of them has included traffic by the hosting provider. If you just go to some dedicated hosting provider which doesn't charge Amazon cloud rates for bandwidth.
Yeah. So the short answer is, right now, if we have 3 mirrors, they would all use about 180 to 200 terabytes of traffic per month in Europe. That's what when I last looked at it last year sometime. And right now, all of that traffic is going through one box in Sweden, which must be smoking. I guess it's a telco and they don't notice it. If we had 10 mirrors, then you could probably divide that by 10.
Let him finish.
And then we would need 10 mirrors. And right now, you look at our requirements, it's crazy. You need 14 IPv4s. Forget it. You need one. You only need one, and you need more diversity. And I don't know why our current setup is like that. There are probably very good reasons for it. But if you look at other software projects, they don't have that. And so I think where we're at with this is what is required to fix it probably is for one of the cluster admin people to go and sit in a room for a month with a piece of paper and some pencil and look at all of the things and figure out how to solve all of those problems that the existing system solves in a simpler way, and then coming back and saying, okay, for that, then now I need this configuration, but I can do this with 20 mirrors. One of our really big problems is when we do a release, we release like a couple of 100 GB of packages quarterly latest, and the releases themselves, which are much smaller, they're a drop in the bucket compared to packages. So maybe 250 GB, but we need to distribute that with rsync to all of our servers, and that's just slow. It's really,
There
really
is a
slow.
nice tool we have in ports called ZSync.
Yeah, all of that stuff people have looked at, and it doesn't change the fact that you need to wait for the entire world to sync before you can announce your release. So we're not bound by the fastest servers or the nicest tech.
Goodness.
We're actually bound by that one server in a cupboard in Armenia or wherever else it is, the box in Antarctica or New Zealand, where the network connection truly sucks all the time. And we wait 2 days to distribute this traffic around the world. And in fact, at the moment, we do weird stuff like going, I forget what it is, but one of the examples is to Russia. So how do we get the data into Russia? Well, we go to like Japan, and then we go to Korea, and then from Korea, we can finally get to Russia relatively quickly. It's something like that. And that network stuff is really slow. But what we should really want is fast, active caching, and then you can release them centrally, do like Untronig does, warm the cache, and when you've got most of it in most countries, you can announce it, knowing that the leftover bits will sort themselves out pretty quickly.
You're kind of describing. Sorry,
I just want to say, years ago when I was helping out to maintain .am, of course, which runs completely on FreeBSD, it's give or take around 12 servers. I noticed that we compile and build all the things, and we don't use, like, we didn't have a package cache or a mirror. We were just like building everything. And when I asked the previous sysadmin, like, why do we do this? He said, hey, when a new release is out, it's faster to sync the source code and build the images than actually download the pre-built images and packages.
It is.
So like it was a very, I had no, and this was 10 years ago. I assume we have now better bandwidth, but still we also have more packages and larger file sizes.
Was it reproducible? Geez.
No, but it was very interesting. Like the guy would basically dedicate one machine to building the packages and the the kernel in the world that we need, and then mount over NFS to everyone else, the user source and the user opt, and just do make install on all of the machines. And now you have .am updated on the latest FreeBSD. That was faster and easier.
For your machines, not the cache. Okay, got it.
Yeah. Like apparently compiling things was faster than downloading things. So, yeah.
So just to throw it out there, as part of that how to become a mirror, there should be some live data and expectations on what kind of bandwidth you may be getting into, because you may have the best intentions, but then find that you get slammed and then hit with a very expensive bandwidth bill that you were trying to do the right thing for the community, but then kind of screwed yourself. So this is a complicated, challenging problem, but I'm so glad you're addressing so many aspects of it and have done so many things to date. So Dave, you're the closest thing we have to a leader to relay this further. But yeah, good work. Go ahead, John.
What we don't have, as far as I know, is a sufficiently capable, finely granular control plane that you can say, here is my 16 or maybe 8 terabyte SSD node with 50 terabytes of traffic or whatever. Hit it until it's used up for the month, and then take it out of the load balancing.
Oh, good point.
This kind of stuff, so that a mirror just doesn't go down, but signs out.
Yeah.
Until it signs back. So it's still there, but not loaded anymore. And you can steer traffic. But we don't have that kind of capability. What we would need for that, at the very least, would be to use HTTP redirects, which would be really messy. It would be better if we have some kind of API thing where you could ask, hey, where can I get this package, basically? And then you get a set of candidates, and you would have something tracking where what asset is available. If we have this, we could also more gracefully maybe deal with keeping old packages available if they don't build in the current version and so on, so that you can at least downgrade stuff. But again, that's a lot of little things which have to change. So it's not an easy project to get integrated to the point
No.
that you can actually profit of that.
It's a really, really complicated problem where you can't change the existing user-facing setup. So, like the example saying, well, what happens if you just say you got 50 gigs of fast or 50 terabytes of traffic, and then after that you remove yourself? What that really means is performance is incredibly variable for people, and suddenly it just drops off completely, and that's a really bad experience. It's not something we solve in a phone call. We're just poking at it and little pieces of the problem. It requires someone from cluster admin to sit down and think through the whole problem and go, okay, to fix this, I need how we distribute packages to change, which is something that Alan Jude has done. I think was it last year or the year before. It's now able to give a package layout where you can use it from a CDN. So the packages are not named, they're hashed, and that means you don't have to flush the CDN cache. You can just let it run. So people are still trying to pull the old traffic as there's people who are trying to pull the old packages will still be able to find them, for example. So that stuff is happening. It's just very slow because we're a volunteer project.
And what we can't do is we can't break the current configuration, but running prototypes in addition to what currently exists shouldn't be that much of a nightmare. So you can try things, just make a test.package or whatever, testing.package, and then you can have something which does some kind of clever stuff. Yeah. I guess you could have HTTP redirects from some kind of caching application.
But those don't work either because people don't download just one package. They download 30. So what happens is you do the redirect and then the redirect and the redirect.
Yeah,
and the
that's fine.
So, yeah.
That's fine. The redirects are lots of requests, but not a lot of traffic. And the next question is, what will it becomes a lot easier when you can push some of the intelligence into the client. Because it's really hard when you have to work with something as dumb as a browser, especially as dumb as a browser without JavaScript. So if you just do call this without any client-side logic, sure, then it's a hard problem, but it becomes a lot more approachable when you have some kind of logic in the client, and the client knows that, okay, this is not just normal HTTP. It's okay to try multiple concurrent requests. It's okay to abandon a slow request if I get a better mirror. So if one mirror becomes too slow, maybe try another one, and that one is better. You switch over.
I have a quick question for context. If FreeBSD 15 happens to be really good and there's a surge in popularity, is the mirroring infrastructure ready for that? And what might be the first thing to buckle if not ready?
Patience.
Patience.
We code fine with 14.3.
Mm-hmm.
I would write, I think I wrote in my wishes for 15 things we have to have. I said we really have to have the FASI thing done. I don't think it's a lot of work, but I don't actually know if that's correct. I think it's more one of those things where you sit down for 2 or 3 days and work through their specific config and then test it, and then it's good. But I would really like to see that for 15. And the reason for that is because then we can put the Fastly DNS name into the package config in the installer, for example. or in the fastest package tool, anything like that.
Would that be a mess if the agreement goes away, such that we're fastlified, but then that somehow it stops or goes away? It's forever a part of the legacy. I don't know. Can that be more vendor independent, I suppose is what I'm trying to ask here.
I think you would just change the way the SFV record is configured in the zone to
Uh-huh.
resolve to fastly as first, and for some reason we no longer want to use them as Leecher non-paying customer, whatever you want to call it, or barely paying customer, we would then change it back. So instead of resolving to geomir.package.whatever, the CNAME would resolve to something else. So as long as we have a dedicated domain and the pkg.freebsd.org resolves to it, FreeBSD users would only notice that package fetch became a lot faster.
Hmm.
The other thing which would be important is that while there are some really big packages, Chromium, LLVM, and the like, several hundred megabytes for one package, most of them are pretty small. Think of all the little Python and Perl modules
Yep.
imports. And for those, the problem isn't that we don't have the bandwidth, it's just the network round trip and the non-pipelined requests. So if we know that the mirrors are all HTTP2 capable, you could have interleaved fetches for multiple packages within reason, because you don't want to kill the infrastructure with too many concurrent requests, but enough to keep the link busy while you're maybe already checksumming and decompressing one package. You can fetch the next two just hidden in the latency. And stuff would be so much faster and nicer. So throughput, while important, is not everything. If you
Mm-hmm.
actually spend a lot of time just waiting on something else in the network,
So, Antonig, you've stumbled onto something pretty revealing, and I'm so glad that so many parallel efforts are taking place, and well, hopefully some good comes out of this.
Fingers crossed, eh?
Ah, time for Szechuan. Excellent. On that note, any other topics? Adrian, do you have something fun if you're able to talk at work, etc.? Daniel had to take off. Anyway, that was enlightening. Antonig, are you working on anything fun in parallel?
Yes, I am. I'm working on whose browser are we looking at?
That's
fine.
beyond.
Can you go to vshop? That's
Can you drop me
phonetically
the link?
possible.
Yeah,
Yeah,
chat,
that's
and
even
I will
easier.
open it.
There you go. I'm working on improving my friend's compiler's ecosystem, which is tier one for FreeBSD. I'm currently building a CI on top of FreeBSD and other operating systems. Obviously, it's a CI, so like we need to compile it for testing on every major operating system. But I've built multiple bindings for FreeBSD, such as libjail, libucl, libexo, one other thing which I don't remember that was part of FreeBSD. So yeah, the goal is, for me personally at least, is to have FreeBSD bindings for this programming language, so people kernel modules, because I had to look into integrating integrating this into kernel modules, and that's a doable thing.
Cool.
Yeah. That's one thing I'm working on. I guess also documenting it, and another one is from Dave's request is yeah, there we go. So I'm porting the RIPE software anchor. That's what RIPE Atlas runs on into FreeBSD. And I'm also working on the dtrace issue that we had, which is planned for 15, at least in the HackMD document, apparently, or maybe it was just copied previously. I don't. So yeah, all of I have multiple FreeBSD things going on. Non-FreeBSD thing is if Dave is still here and is interested. I'm integrating DNSSEC into Erlang because there is no DNSSEC support. But whether like checking if DNSSEC exists or
Oh,
any of the DNSSEC requests, yeah, I'm almost there. I needed it for there's a government contract that I'm doing.
uh-huh.
They basically are writing like a massive checker, basically, you know, or government domains pointing where they are supposed to be, or the DNSSEC is the DNSSEC valid, and all of that. So that's a major Erlang. And I told them like, hey, if you want me to do it, I'm gonna write it in Erlang Elixir. So they said okay, and that's when I figured out. Oh shit, we don't have any DNSSEC libraries. So yeah, so there's that, and yeah, it's going well. I mean, it's Erlang. How hard could it be? You know?
I just added a really nice bunch of C tools for DNSSEC to ports, and if I was doing stuff in C, sorry, if I was doing this stuff, I was considering writing a NIF for this. I'll send you the link for it shortly.
Yes, please. Yeah. Yeah. And I saw you also did the work on Daisy UI and Tailwind on FreeBSD.
Yeah. I tried very, very hard to get version 4 to go, but it's a classic Node.js thing where you need to unpack this so that you can patch this, so that then you can unpack this and patch that. And at the end of the day, it has 3 Rust libraries that are called in as modules, like 3 or 4 layers down, and it's just the Node ecosystem just gets my blood up. It really does. Just go. It's this cobbled together garbage with no thinking of modularity or reuse, and it's just shit on shit on shit of people not understanding computers, and then they build businesses on it. It's like, okay. Anyway, I will drop this in the notes that I can find them.
I think it's added to like the CIA guidelines. If they want to torture someone in Guantanamo Bay, they can use Node.js modules or something. I'm not sure, but I've heard something in the underground.
Yeah. Anyway, if this thing is useful, if you look and go, that's useful, let me know and I'll send you my document with notes for it. So I use it for generating private keys for DNSSEC, which sounds like a bit, you can probably do this with OpenSSL, but once you've generated the keys, you then need to transform them into the idiosyncratic config and details that's used actually by the upstream registrars, and it does that really well, and that's the nice piece. And incidentally, when I was doing that, I found a bug in the Erlang DNS server that I knew had been there for about 5 or 6 years, and I could never track it down. And when I did my original testing with this tool, I knew that the KSK and the ZSK were being confused, and the output of the DNS server versus the output of these tools was different. Bug has finally been fixed now. It's one of those things that I didn't understand enough to realize where the bug lay or what the bug was. Yeah, but if you want a great DNS server in Elixir or Erlang, hit me up. I have the bits, and you can use them. They're really good. Nice and easy to use.
There's also Earl DNS.
Also, what? Sorry.
Earl DNS or LDNS, which is
DNS
server in Erlang.
Build the bits off that so you can use it in Elixir. And
nice.
I've got two tricks to my pony there. One is I have AXFR support, so zone transfer support, and they don't.
Yeah.
It's like 5 lines. You need to know where to add those 5 lines. And the effort was not in the 5 lines. The effort was reading the RFC to figure out what those 5 lines need to be. So if you want that, I'm happy to do it. I'm waiting for their version 7. And when their version 7 of LDNS is released finally, I will turn my thing into an Elixir package for it. Because at the moment, I'm too embarrassed to release it. It works brilliantly in my infrastructure, but it assumes you're using CouchDB in this particular way. And that's a bit arbitrary. So the version I want to do for them is to, there's a clustered library from RabbitMQ that does clustering. And that's actually what I want to use. So you would have one node that listens to whatever system you want, and you would deploy it, and then it would update all the nodes in the cluster immediately. And today I use CouchDB for this, which works brilliantly, but this would be a more general solution. Yeah. Anyway, DNS.
DNS. Never a problem for people like us, you know. But for me, it's always NTP that's the problem.
Is it? Does that bite you too often, does it?
Oh, it bites me too often. It's like, oh, here's a Raspberry Pi out of sync with time. Can I sync it? Well, another NTP program is using the socket. I'm like, okay, which one is it? And it's a whole mess. I should sit one day and figure out the FreeBSD NTP bits.
Actually, Levi worked on some of that, and that's a nice segue to my notion on arrival at the campsite was 15 in 15 on 15, which is like 15 key roles, like a web server, a NAS, a DNS server, whatever, in 15 minutes on FreeBSD 15. Just here are some, a bit like your, I don't know, overlay networking. Here are a NTP server just with a USB interface or serial interface, which Levi pounded his head against. What are some just very tangible tasks we can communicate very clearly with some best practices as opposed to the bare minimum syntax to get people in trouble? But anyway, almost like 15 really cool solutions
with Podman. So one of the things I want to do with Podman is provide an equivalent of like FreeBSD ports, but for Podman containers. So you would submit your Podman containerized version of, let's say, Nginx or DNS, or whatever thing you want.
The App Store, yes.
It's like exactly. It's like an App Store, and they'd all be built off the standard FreeBSD packages. It would be a registry of Docker files, but they're called container files, and I think that'd be pretty neat. I would use that a lot. But at the moment, I can see people already developing those things themselves. It's not like a Podman hub. It's the recipes that you use to make your own packages. And that is the difference, not having things where people will pull them from, although we could do that as well, I guess. Any registry would host that. Yeah.
Right. How would you handle the opinionated nature of people who think, oh, well, I love this obscure web server and everything else is reasonable? I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm still working on my jailer file thing, and I for my prototype I even made a mix target. It's called technically, I think, where you would do like mix release .jailer file, and it will automatically generate a jailer file for you in the release directory. So then you can just ship your Elixir application into a jail that's built via a jailer file. Like, okay, here's the Erlang version that I need, here's the Elixir thing that I need, and the typical things like, dependency download, the dependency compile, and all of that. But yeah, because Phoenix had something similar for Docker, like it would automatically generate a Docker file for your Phoenix application. So I built something similar to that for jailer. Terrible file format. I hate my current jailer file. I might actually end up just copying what Docker has. Well,
do compare notes with Dave so we don't reinvent that wheel too many times. And take care, Dave. It's something you have to run.
Yeah. My friend actually also had a good thought, which is like, hey, if you copy the Docker file as is, you can ignore what you don't use and use what they have, meaning that every Docker file can literally be a jailer file. like in a project, people can just do a symlink and
Yeah.
like, hey, that's it. So that might also be a very cool idea to use. I'll think about it. Like
That would
if
be
it,
familiar to users, no?
yeah, also, yeah, exactly. Also familiar to users. Yeah. Yeah. On that topic, actually, my another friend who I was demoing Jailer 2 in the weekend, we had a very big bug bounty for like 3 banks. Uh, they put me in the jury. For some reason, people keep trusting me with security. So when I was demoing it to my friends, one of their reactions was like, "Hey, I like your syntax, but like, can you have a configuration where you say use Docker CLI?" And then suddenly it could be like one-to-one compatible with Docker. That way, if someone is coming from Docker to here, they would
Bingo.
have, yeah. Because Podman did the same thing, right? Like Podman had their own kind of commands initially when they were like, beta, and then they ended up being one-to-one compatible with Docker in a way that you could just like do alias Docker equals Podman and use it. And like now every time you type in Docker, it's actually Podman and everything will just continue to work.
Cool.
Hard implementation though.
And I can imagine like best effort dependency resolution, perhaps. I don't know, just thinking out loud. So
Yeah,
1839.
exactly. Yeah.
You
That's a
can't really
nightmare
do
coming
that.
from Debian, because
You
like
really shouldn't
Debian,
be doing that. Dependencies either satisfied or not.
Okay.
Don't try to put some kind of fuzzy logic in there, like, oh, maybe works if. No,
It's vibe
just
logic. Vibe logic.
just make it fail and quickly fix this,
Yep.
and have better automated testing so that this kind of problem doesn't even make it to an official mirror.
yeah.
Oh, anything else? Any last bits?
Yeah, that would be kind of not for the recording.
Well, Antonig, I suggest you have the honors.
Oh, thank you. Please like and subscribe.
Bye.